Our story began with such high hopes. From the very first moment, I was completely drawn to her. Lila had this radiant smile and a presence that seemed to brighten everything around her. I fell for her hard, convinced we were unstoppable. We were young, brimming with optimism, and certain that nothing could ever drive a wedge between us. Back then, I poured myself into long hours at work, believing I was securing our future together, but I failed to notice the subtle changes brewing beneath the surface. Over time, my career became all-consuming. It's not that I stopped caring about Lila, but somewhere along the way, the dreams we once shared began diverging into separate realities. Then, one night, everything unraveled. I was half asleep, the rain pattering softly outside, when her voice broke through the quiet. It was low, almost hesitant, but something about her tone jolted me awake. "What did you just say, Lila?" I asked, dread curling in my stomach. She switched on the bedside lamp, but wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm unhappy, Ethan," she said softly, and the weight of those words hit me like a blow. Her unhappiness wasn't just a feeling. It was a declaration of how far apart we drifted. "Unhappy? With me?" I asked, my voice cracking as I struggled to hold it together. Her eyes welled with tears, and still, she avoided looking at me. "I don't know why, Ethan. I just am," she whispered, leaving me reeling. My frustration bubbled over, and I asked if she wanted to leave me. Her silence gave me the answer I feared most. Anger surged, and I bolted out of bed, needing space to process her bombshell. Lila reached for me, but I pulled away, unwilling to comfort the very person who had shattered my world. "Do you or don't you want to stay married to me?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I intended. She hesitated, and her silence was deafening. That silence spoke volumes, and it broke me. Too drained to keep arguing, I grabbed a blanket and retreated to my office, desperate to escape the suffocating weight of her confession. But Lila wasn't done. Her voice followed me down the hall, rising in frustration. "I want to feel loved," she cried out. "I want a man who actually wants me, who makes me feel beautiful and desired." Those words hit me like a freight train, and suddenly, I saw the truth. Someone else had been making her feel that way. "Jacob," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Jacob, my ex-best friend." In that moment, my world stopped turning. It's such a cliché, a wife and a best friend. But there's no way to prepare for the devastation of it actually happening to you. The betrayal felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Both of them had chosen each other over me, and the sheer weight of that realization was soul-crushing. Pain, that's the only word for it. No synonyms can capture its depth or magnitude. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand answers, but I couldn't. The words felt meaningless in the face of such a profound betrayal. Instead, I left her standing there and locked myself in my office. Lila knocked and called my name, but I stayed silent, refusing to open the door. I couldn't trust myself to face her, not in that moment. Eventually, she gave up, and I was left alone with the quiet. But it wasn't really quiet. My mind refused to stop replaying everything, obsessing over when things had started falling apart. There weren't any glaring red flags, no obvious decline in affection. By all appearances, we were fine. Stable, at least. But somewhere along the line, Jacob had wormed his way into our lives in ways I never saw coming. Jacob, who I'd known for 13 years. We had started as co-workers and eventually became close friends. Even after I got promoted and he moved to a different job, we stayed in touch, though not as often as before. Looking back now, I wonder if the growing distance between us was the first sign of something darker. As the hours dragged on, sleep remained elusive. My mind kept circling back to Jacob and all the times I missed the clues. By the time the sun began to rise, I hadn't slept at all. Drained, I got up, used the bathroom, and considered calling in sick. But staying home meant facing Lila, and I wasn't ready for that. From my office, I heard my alarm go off upstairs. It should have been the start of a normal day, waking up beside my wife. Instead, Lila silenced it, and moments later, I heard her footsteps descending the stairs. She knocked on my office door. "Ethan, are you awake?" I stayed quiet, hoping she'd go away, but she opened the door anyway. Ethan, I know you're awake. We've been together 10 years. I know how you look when you're sleeping. What do you want, Lila? I muttered, still facing the wall. I was worried about you, she said, and I couldn't help but snort at the irony. Worried about me? After everything she'd done? I'm fine. Go away. But she didn't leave. Instead, she started talking about last night, trying to downplay it as if it had somehow gotten out of hand. I finally turned to face her, noticing the dark circles under her eyes. She looked as wrecked as I felt. Messed up? You cheated on me with my best friend and told me you're unhappy. That's not exactly complicated, is it? Do you want to be married to me, Lila? Her nervous fidgeting was answer enough. It's not that simple, Ethan, she said. Before I could respond, our daughters, Emma and Olivia, came downstairs. Without a word, Lila and I fell into our usual morning routine, the tension between us palpable but unspoken. Once the girls were off to school, we went our separate ways, leaving the elephant in the room untouched. At work, I tried to bury myself in tasks, desperate for distraction. My mind was a whirlwind during the drive, but once I arrived, I forced my focus onto a new engine project my team was struggling with. Ryan, my eager intern, greeted me with coffee and ideas about the cooling issue. He tried to reach me the night before, but I brushed it off, needing to keep Lila out of my head. For a while, at least, work was my refuge. That morning, I paused at my assistant Chloe's desk. She noticed right away that something was off. You okay? She asked, her voice full of concern. I appreciated her asking, but I wasn't about to unpack my disaster of a life in the middle of the office. I'm fine, I said shortly, forcing a small smile before heading to my office. The day dragged on, a blur of meetings, emails, and project updates. It was business as usual, but my mind kept drifting back to the night before. No matter how much I tried to focus, I couldn't stop hearing Lila's voice. I'm unhappy, Ethan. Those words stuck with me, a constant reminder of everything falling apart. By the time I left work, it was dark. I started my car, finding a strange sense of comfort in the quiet hum of the engine. There's something reassuring about the smooth power of a well-made machine. Luxury cars don't shout like muscle cars do. They don't have to. They exude quiet confidence, a reminder of success. Have you ever noticed you don't see ads for Teslas or Aston Martins? They don't need them. A man's car reflects who he is. Muscle cars scream for attention, but a luxury car speaks of understated power. I've always been drawn to that kind of confidence because growing up, I had none. My dad was a mechanic, my mom worked at Walmart, and my classmates lived lives I could only dream of. At 16, they drove brand new cars and wore designer clothes while I saved my best by paycheck to buy a beat-up Neon. My only advantage was that I was smarter than most of them. I worked harder, determined to build the life I never had. My kids wouldn't feel inferior to anyone. They'd be the ones others envied. But as I drove home that night, the thought of my daughters only brought pain. Olivia and Emma were waiting for me at home, along with Lila, the woman who had said last night that Jacob made her feel loved. The thought made my stomach churn. The drive was too quiet, forcing me to sit with my thoughts, replaying every word, every moment. The anger and hurt I'd felt had dulled into something worse, numbness. When I walked through the door, the scene was painfully normal. Olivia was at the table, focused on her homework. Emma was sprawled on the floor with her crayons. Lila sat on the couch, her laptop perched on her knees, SpongeBob playing on the TV. Hi, Daddy. Olivia greeted cheerfully, glancing up from her work. Emma waved distractedly before going back to her coloring. Lila looked up cautiously, her face unreadable. Hi, honey. How was work? She asked, her voice light but strained. It was work, I said flatly, not giving her much to go on. She nodded and added, I made you a plate. It's in the microwave. It might be cold now since you weren't here when we ate. Her tone carried a faint edge, almost as if she was justifying herself. Well, I had a long day. I shot back, unable to keep my frustration from bleeding through. Gotta keep earning for the family. The tension was obvious, but we both held back. Not in front of the girls. We went through the motions of the evening, the weight of last night hanging over us like a storm cloud. Later, after the girls were in bed, Lila appeared in the doorway of my office. "Are we finally going to talk about this?" she asked hesitantly. I sighed and turned to face her. "Fine." She stepped in and sat on the couch, the same couch I'd been sleeping on. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she began, her voice soft. "I never wanted to hurt you, but things haven't been right for a long time. I don't even know where to start." "Start with Jacob," I said bluntly. "I don't need apologies. I need the truth." Tears welled in her eyes, and she took a shaky breath. "It started about a year ago," she admitted. "Jacob's always been there, but I didn't start seeing him differently until then. You were gone so much, and I felt like I was doing everything alone. Jacob was just there. He listened." She smiled faintly at the memory, and my anger flared. "So he was sweet, huh? That's your excuse? I forgot a birthday or two. So you slept with my best friend?" Her face hardened. "You think this is about a birthday? What about the anniversaries, the date nights, the vacations you missed? All the times you were physically here but completely absent mentally? When did it start?" I demanded. "April," she said quietly. 6 months ago," I said bitterly. "Right around the time Jacob stopped coming by." "Where? Was it in my bed? On the couch? A hotel?" "Yes," she admitted, looking down. "Do you love him?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay calm. "I think so," she whispered. "And me? Do you still love me?" My throat tightened as I forced the question out. "Yes, but not the way I should," she said, her voice trembling. "Not the way a wife should love her husband." Her words cut deep. We sat in heavy silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. Finally, she broke the quiet. "What do we do now?" she asked softly. I let out a long, shaky breath. "I don't know, Lila. I really don't. What do you think we do?" I snapped, already knowing what she wanted. Lila was looking for permission to move on, to absolve her guilt. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. "You want to leave? In the marriage? Fine. You take the lead. Get a lawyer. Serve me the divorce papers. Move out. And explain to the kids why you tore this family apart. You started this. Now finish it." "Ethan." "Don't Ethan me," I interrupted, the bitterness spilling out. "What did you expect? For me to wish you happiness? Apologize for missing your birthday? You cheated, Lila. Adults don't cheat. Now get out of my office before I say something you'll regret hearing." She left without another word, leaving the air heavy with everything unsaid. If life were simple, the divorce papers would have arrived the next day. But it wasn't that easy. About a week later, I noticed Lila researching lawyers, her brows furrowed as she scrolled on her laptop or left the room with her phone. Watching her do it stung, a cruel confirmation that she was serious about leaving. I realized I needed my own lawyer. Chloe, my assistant, referred me to Nathan Ross, our company's attorney. Though not a divorce specialist, he could connect me with the right person. At his office, we made small talk before he asked about my situation. "My wife's filing for divorce. She cheated on me," I explained, keeping my tone flat. Nate nodded sympathetically. "I've been there, Ethan. Divorce is brutal. What do you want out of this? A clean break or to go scorched earth?" He laid out 2 options. Mike, the Navy SEAL, handled divorces quietly and efficiently. Phil, the Marine, left nothing behind. A total war strategy. Both approaches had merit, depending on how much I wanted to fight. "I don't know yet," I admitted. "It depends on her." "Well, don't wait too long," he advised. "In divorce cases, the one who moves first usually has the advantage." I left feeling worse than when I arrived. Deep down, I still hoped Lila might change her mind. But watching her push forward with the divorce made it clear. She was done with me. I started questioning everything. Did she ever really love me? While I hesitated, Lila seemed determined to move on, making me feel like a fool for clinging to hope. The next morning, I dressed for work in the bedroom we used to share. Lila was still asleep, lying on her side in an old t-shirt. Looking at her, I was struck by how beautiful she still was and how much I'd taken her for granted. A wave of longing hit me, the kind I hadn't felt in years. Without thinking, I reached out and gently touched her waist. She murmured in her sleep, "Yes, Jacob, yes." I froze, my chest tightening as if I'd been stabbed. I'd never gone from aroused to crushed so quickly. My heart broke all over again, and whatever fragile bond of hope I'd been clinging to finally shattered. I had lost her. Our marriage was truly over. Fighting back tears, I left the room. Lila stirred and called out to me, but I ignored her. Once inside my office, I locked the door and broke down, crying harder than I ever had. Lila came knocking, apologizing, but I shoved the door closed, slamming it in her face. Fueled by rage, I grabbed my keys and drove straight to Jacob's house. My knuckles ached from how hard I pounded on his door, the adrenaline making me blind to the neighbors peeking out from their windows. All I cared about was hurting him, making him feel the pain I was drowning in. Then my phone rang. It was Lila. "Jacob called the cops, Ethan," she warned, her voice frantic. "Think about the girls and your job. Don't do this." Even through my fury, I knew she was right. I couldn't lose everything over this. Reluctantly, I left, but not before yelling one last threat at Jacob's closed door. As I drove away, I tried to hold back the tears, but the overwhelming exhaustion hit me. I was tired of hoping, tired of holding on to a future that no longer existed. At a stop sign, I blew through without thinking and nearly hit a mother and her child crossing the street. The close call shook me to my core. Shaking, I pulled over to the side of the road and gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't in the right frame of mind to drive, or to make any decisions. It was time to accept the truth. My marriage was over. There was no saving it. Taking a deep breath, I reached into my pocket and pulled out Nate's business card. He had given me two choices: Mike, the quiet resolution, or Phil, the scorched earth Marine. My heart still raw, I dialed the number and asked for the Marine. "Ethan, what happened?" Nate asked, his voice calm but concerned. "She called out Jacob's name while I was touching her," I said, my voice thick with humiliation. Nate sighed. "Listen, Ethan, you need to step back. Go to a hotel, clear your head. This isn't the time to make life-altering decisions." Anger clouds judgment. His words hit me, forcing me to pause. As much as I wanted to unleash my fury, I still cared about what came next. My daughters didn't deserve to be caught in the crossfire. I had to think clearly, for them, if nothing else. "I can't stop thinking about it," I admitted. My heart's shattered. They're acting like I'm the villain here. What do I do, Nate? Right now? Take a breather. I'm sending you an address. Meet me there in 15 minutes. You need a drink, and I'm buying, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Before I could respond, he hung up. I slumped over the steering wheel, overwhelmed. For someone who was used to being in control, this was the worst feeling in the world. But maybe Nate was right. Maybe I needed to step back and figure out what mattered most. Minutes after I called Nate, I got a message: Mario's Gentleman Lounge, a strip club. My life was in shambles, and his solution was a lap dance? It felt absurd, but I didn't have the energy to argue. Inside, I was greeted by a woman who could have stepped out of a dream. Glitter shimmered on her flawless skin, and her sultry voice carried a warmth that momentarily disarmed me. Her minimal outfit left little to the imagination. "You must be Ethan," she said, her eyes locking onto mine. "I'm Starlet. Nate sent me to bring you to him." I stammered something unintelligible, and she smiled knowingly before leading me to the VIP section. Her hips swayed as I followed, and for a moment, I forgot why I was even there. Upstairs, the atmosphere shifted. Soft lighting, smooth jazz, and a sense of calm compared to the chaos below. Nate greeted me with a drink, surrounded by women who looked like they belonged on magazine covers. Starlet took my hand and guided me to a secluded corner. Without warning, she straddled me, her touch sending shivers through my already frayed nerves. "First time?" she asked, her lips curving into a playful smile. "Yeah," I admitted, trying to act casual. "I haven't even started yet, sweetie," she teased with a laugh. As the music played, I let myself get lost in the moment. For a brief time, the weight of my problems lifted. Nate's unorthodox plan to clear my head was actually working. I stayed for an hour, sipping my drink and trying not to overthink things. When the room emptied, Nate leaned forward, his tone turning serious. Now that your mind's clear, let's talk. What do you want when all this is over? What can you live with? I took a sip of the now warm beer, considering his words. I want what's fair, I said finally. But more than anything, I want to protect my kids. He nodded and slid a business card across the table. Call Mike tomorrow. I'll tell him to expect you. As Nate prepared to leave, I blurted, Do you miss your ex? Do you wish things had worked out? For the first time, his confident facade cracked. Every day, he said quietly, he admitted to cheating on his wife, the mistake that ended his marriage. She's better off now, married to a schoolteacher. I've got money, but she's happier with him. His confession surprised me. It made me see him differently. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a man weighed down by his own regrets. Then, almost casually, he mentioned that Starlet offered extras beyond lap dances. I didn't understand at first, so I asked, You mean? Not for money, he said with a sly grin. But we've had our moments. She's great at relieving stress. I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me felt drawn to Starlet. The way she touched my hand, the way her eyes lingered. It felt like there was a spark. But I reminded myself that flirting was her job. It wasn't real. Paying for something like that felt wrong, especially with everything else crumbling around me. So when Nate asked if I wanted her to come up, I shook my head. Nah, I need to head out. Thanks for the drink, Nate. And for listening. Anytime, Ethan. Good luck. The next morning, I made a different kind of move. I went to Jacob's office. When he walked in and saw me sitting in his chair, his face drained of color. Good morning, Jacob, I said cheerfully, leaning back like I owned the place. Ethan, he stammered. How the hell did you get in here? You've got 10 seconds before I call security. Put the phone down, Jacob. I just want to talk. You owe me that much. He hesitated, then set his phone on the desk. Fine, talk. But don't mess with my job. It took everything in me not to lunge at him. You've got a lot of nerve talking about not making trouble after what you did, I said coldly. He looked down, ashamed. I'm sorry, Ethan. I really am. It's been eating at me. Eating at you? I laughed bitterly. What exactly are you sorry for? Betraying me? Ruining my marriage? Breaking up my family? Or throwing away 13 years of friendship? Jacob shifted uncomfortably. I know I betrayed you. I regret it. But Lila needed someone, Ethan. You weren't there for her. I stood up, towering over him. Is that how you justify it? That I had this coming because I was working to provide for my family? You think that makes you the hero in this story? He didn't back down, his tone growing defensive. You didn't want a family, Ethan. If you did, you would have made time for her. His self-righteousness infuriated me. You think whispering sweet nothings to my wife makes you a good man? You don't know the first thing about being a husband. A family is more than what happens in bed, Jacob. I pressed him with questions about my daughters, questions he couldn't answer. You don't even know my girls. You've never had to put their needs before your own. All you know is what it's like to sleep with Lila. Ethan, he started, but I cut him off. Save it, Jacob. If you can betray me after all these years, how do you think you'll handle a marriage? You have no idea what it takes to protect a family. As I turned to leave, Jacob called after me. I love her, Ethan. Whether you believe it or not, I love her. I paused, shaking my head. I don't ever want to see you again, Jacob. This is your only warning. One day, you'll answer for this. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it'll happen. I left him standing there, his bravado shattered. In the months that followed, the divorce process picked up speed. Lila found a lawyer, a decent one, which brought some relief. We still lived in the same house, but I stayed in my office, a permanent truce that kept us from outright war. For now, the battle lines were drawn. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The pain and anger didn't vanish. They dulled into a persistent ache that occasionally flared up. Sometimes, it was a laugh I overheard on her phone, or a gift that clearly wasn't from me. Those moments were bitter, but they became less frequent. We interacted only when necessary, mainly for the girls, keeping up appearances for their sake. On the surface, We were friendly, but any sense of closeness was gone. It was the best we could manage under the circumstances. I know it's a cliché for divorced men to bury themselves in work, but for me, it wasn't much different. The only change was that I didn't feel guilty about it anymore. Jacob stayed out of sight, and though I hadn't heard from him since our confrontation, I occasionally missed the camaraderie we'd shared. Making new friends had never been easy for me, and now I had no one but my job. Lila, meanwhile, seemed to be moving on. I didn't ask, but I suspected she was still seeing Jacob. She'd go out with flimsy excuses, not bothering to hide it, but not rubbing it in my face either. I appreciated that much, but it didn't ease the bitterness. She had the chance to start over, while I was left stuck in the wreckage. It burned. Life might have carried on this way until the divorce was finalized if it hadn't been for Olivia. One evening, she came into my office, clutching a school flyer. "Daddy? Mrs. Benson needs the money for my cheerleading uniform tomorrow. Mommy forgot to give it to me." I vaguely remembered Lila mentioning cheerleading, but I hadn't realized it had gotten this far. "How much is it?" I asked, still distracted by my work. $198.99, she said proudly. I almost choked. After she left, the guilt hit hard. I didn't even know Olivia was in cheerleading. What kind of father was I? The thought haunted me. Lila had likely been covering for me, making excuses for my absence. But the truth was, I wasn't a soldier deployed overseas or stuck in unavoidable circumstances. I was just choosing work over them. Facing that truth was brutal. I'd always justified my hours as working for them, but I didn't have to work 80 hours a week. I chose to. It was easier than facing the responsibilities of being a husband and father. That night, I closed my laptop and made a choice. "Girls, who wants pizza and ice cream?" I called out, and their joyful screams were all the answer I needed. At the restaurant, amidst half-eaten pizza and empty ice cream bowls, I received a panicked text from Lila. "Emergency. Call me immediately. The girls are gone. I thought you were home with them. Please come back so we can find them." I replied quickly, "They're with me." Her response was immediate. "Thank God." Then another message. "You took the girls out?" I didn't reply. Olivia and Emma were too busy serenading me with Let It Go from Frozen. The entire restaurant cheered them on, and I pulled out my phone to record it, unable to stop smiling. For the first time in a long while, I felt connected to my daughters. What happened next floored me. Instead of getting embarrassed by the attention, Olivia stood up and took a bow, quickly joined by Emma. They blew kisses like they were Broadway stars, and the crowd erupted in applause. I laughed, clapping along with everyone else. Watching them, I realized how much I had missed over the years while I'd been buried in work. If I hadn't taken them out that night, I would have missed this too. I didn't want to look back years from now and regret not having moments like this. When my girls bring home boyfriends or fiancés, I want to embarrass them with stories like tonight. After the excitement died down, I paid the bill and we headed home. As we got in the car, Olivia said, "Thank you for the ice cream, Daddy. I like it when you take us out." "You're welcome, sweet pea. Thanks for the song," I replied. "You're the best daddy ever," she giggled before both girls fell asleep in the back seat. I drove in silence, her words echoing in my mind. Kids rarely see their parents' flaws when they're young, even when those flaws are glaring. When we arrived home, I texted Lila. In driveway. "Girls asleep. Need help." She came out moments later, and together we carried the girls to their rooms. Afterward, we met in the hallway, standing awkwardly in the dim light. "So, you stopped working long enough to take them out," Lila said, surprised. "I bet they loved that. What did you guys do?" "We had pizza and ice cream. Then they sang for me, and you should have seen them, Lila. They were amazing. The whole restaurant cheered, and they even took a bow." I laughed, pulling out my phone to show her the video. For a brief moment, we shared a laugh, but it felt strange being so close to her after everything. She stepped back, clearly feeling it too. "I'm glad you spent time with them. You should do that more often," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "Tonight was a wake-up call. I've already lost you. I don't want to lose them too." She studied me, as if trying to gauge my sincerity. After a pause, she said, "No matter what you do, they'll always love you. That's how kids are." Too bad adults aren't like that, I muttered, my voice unintentionally loud enough for her to hear. Regret flickered across her face. Ethan, don't start. The urge to apologize rose, but I held back. Why apologize for the truth? Instead, I asked, was I really that bad, Lila? Bad enough for you to stop loving me? She hesitated, her eyes welling with tears. Of course I feel bad. Every time I think about the plans we had, the memories, it kills me that we'll have to tell the girls. It'll break their hearts. And it was my decision that set all this in motion. So why did you do it? I asked gently, seeing the pain in her expression. She exhaled shakily. I was lonely, Ethan. I had everything, nice clothes, a fancy car, but I was miserable. I just wanted some time with you, small signs that I mattered. But you always made time for everything else. And Jacob gives you that? Her voice trembled as she nodded. Yes, he makes me feel wanted. He texts, sends flowers, likes being around me. Her words stung, but I couldn't ignore them. I had failed her, even if I hated admitting it. Is that what you wanted to hear? Lila asked, her voice raw and trembling. It wasn't, but I needed the truth. Well, soon you two can be together and ride off into the sunset, I replied bitterly. Don't do this, Ethan, she said sharply. What's done is done. Talking like this will only cause more pain. I laughed dryly at the irony. You set us on this road, Lila. Now you want to avoid the pain? Her expression hardened, and she fired back. In case you forgot, you neglected me first. I'm so tired of that excuse, I snapped. You cheated on me, with my best friend. Does anything I did justify that? Her silence was deafening. It spoke louder than any answer she could have given. I pressed on, anger giving way to frustration. Tonight made me realize how I contributed to this mess. But you didn't even try to fix it, Lila. Did you ever suggest counseling? Did you do anything to save this marriage? No. I came to you, and you ignored me. So your next step was to cheat? If you cared about us, why didn't you try harder? Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, I couldn't do it anymore. I was drained. Well, I'm tired too, I said flatly. I'm going to bed. With that, I walked to my office and closed the door, leaving her alone with her guilt. A few weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. It was official. Our marriage was over. The divorce itself was amicable enough, but that didn't make it any less painful. The material assets were divided fairly. Lila got the house since she had primary custody of the girls, and I agreed to child support. Paying spousal support, though, felt like a slap in the face. Supporting the woman who tore apart our family? It stung, but it could have been worse. Thanks to my lawyer, I avoided losing even more. Emotionally, however, I bore the heavier burden. Lila may have walked away with the house, but I was left with the weight of everything we'd lost. As I thought about Olivia and Emma, I questioned whether we'd made the right choice to keep them in the dark. Instead of preparing them gradually, we were about to blindside them with the truth. It wasn't love that made us lie. It was fear. I'd been hiding behind excuses for too long, pretending my bad decisions were for their benefit. The truth was, I'd been a coward. My father used to say, tomorrow's man is made by today's choices. Back then, I didn't understand what he meant, but now it was my guiding principle. The man I was today, estranged, bitter, and overwhelmed, was a result of prioritizing work over family yesterday. If I didn't like that man, it was up to me to change him. I wanted to be a good dad and successful at work. Why couldn't I have both? It was time to rebalance my life. That night, I heard Lila crying in the room we once shared. She was lying on the bed, sobbing, the divorce papers nearby. Seeing her finally express emotion over our failed marriage didn't hit me as hard as it might have before. I'd been dealing with the end for a while, ever since she called out Jacob's name in bed. Now, reality was catching up with her too. Quietly, I closed the door and let her have her moment. Needing a distraction, my mind drifted to Starlet, the dancer I'd met at Mario's Gentleman Lounge. Despite everything Nate had said about her, I couldn't shake the sense of connection I'd felt. On impulse, I drove to the club, unsure of what I was even looking for. At the entrance, I asked if Starlet was there. A younger dancer went to find her, and when Starlet appeared, She didn't seem to recognize me. I tried not to let it bother me. It was expected, after all. I came here a few months ago, I explained. You made me feel better with your dances. She smiled warmly. Would you like another? Without waiting for a reply, she took my hand and led me to a private area. As she held my hand, I realized how much I craved a connection. Upstairs, in the champagne room, she straddled me, her touch sending familiar shivers down my spine. Her voice dropped to a whisper. What do you want, Ethan? I hesitated, unsure of what I was even doing. I'm not sure, I admitted. She smiled knowingly and leaned closer. Do you want more than a lap dance? Her words were soft, but her meaning was clear. I nodded slowly. I think so. Her smile widened as she made her terms explicit. A room, a ride after work, and $300. It was a moment of decision. Did I want to cross this line? Part of me wanted to feel wanted again, to fill the void Lila had left behind. I agreed. I booked a room by the beach with a balcony overlooking the ocean. It wasn't extravagant, but it wasn't cheap either. By the time Starlet emerged from the club around 2:30 a.m., she looked different, more real. Gone was the heavy makeup and seductive persona. Instead, she wore glasses, her hair in a simple ponytail. Hey, Ethan, she said with a small smile. I almost didn't expect you to show up. I opened the car door for her, and as we drove to the hotel, she gently touched my hand. Do you have something for me? She asked, her tone casual but firm. I handed her the envelope, and she quickly tucked it away. As we drove, she complimented my car and asked about my job. I told her I was an engineer and had worked on the engine in the car we were riding in. She seemed impressed, but when she commented on how good I must be at my job, it hit a nerve. I thought of everything I'd sacrificed to succeed. My time, my marriage, my family. She must have noticed the shift in my mood. Did I say something wrong? She asked cautiously. I brushed it off, forcing a weak smile. No, it's nothing. We sat in silence for a while until I asked if she was hungry. She shook her head. Let's just get to the room, she said, her voice cool, professional. Her words stung, reminding me that this was just a transaction. No matter how much I wanted it to be more, it wasn't real. At the hotel, she slipped back into her seductive persona, her voice soft and inviting. So, Ethan, she purred, what do you want to do? And there I was, staring at the choices I'd made and the path I'd taken to get there. But now, I could see through the act. The persona she had so carefully crafted wasn't her. It was just a performance. The fantasy shattered, and with it, my interest. When she leaned in to initiate, I stopped her. Confused, she tilted her head. What do you want, then? I hesitated. I just want to talk. Her frustration was immediate. Are you serious? She said, pulling back. You're looking for the girlfriend experience, aren't you? Not just, Hearing the word girlfriend hit harder than I expected, and suddenly, the tears I'd been holding back all night flowed freely. When I didn't respond, her demeanor softened. She seemed to understand what was really going on. I wasn't there for her. I was there because I was trying to fill the hole Lila had left behind. When the tears finally stopped, she handed me a tissue and sighed. I'm sorry, Ethan, but I can't give you what you're looking for. I can only offer what I'm paid to do, and that doesn't include emotional connection. I nodded, feeling embarrassed but strangely relieved. I understand, I said quietly. As she prepared to leave, she pulled the envelope of money from her purse and tried to return it. I pushed her hand away. No, keep it. You helped me tonight in a way I didn't expect. She studied me for a moment before tucking the money back into her bag. Thanks, she said softly. We headed back to the club, but just as we neared it, she broke the silence. There's an IHOP nearby. Want to grab a bite? Her suggestion caught me off guard, but I found myself agreeing. Sure. Unlimited pancakes sound good right now. At the diner, I watched in amazement as she devoured a plate of pancakes, eggs, and bacon. She caught me staring and glared. What? She mumbled through a mouthful of food. Nothing, I teased. You just eat like someone who hasn't seen food in a week. I was about to give you $1 and ask you to wash my windshield. She smirked, swallowing her bite. Oh, so you're funny now? Weren't you bawling like a little girl an hour ago? Her words stung, and something must have shown on my face because her expression softened. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I was just joking. I didn't mean. I waved it off. It's fine. You're not wrong. I'm just dealing with a lot. She nodded, taking a sip of her orange juice. An awkward silence followed before she spoke again. If you want to talk about it, I'm here. I may be a dancer, but I'm a good listener too. Her self-deprecating laugh made me smile. For a moment, her vulnerability showed, but it disappeared just as quickly. Despite everything, I felt comfortable around her. It's a long, boring story. Trust me, you don't want to hear it. She grinned. You paid me $300 and bought me breakfast. Pretty sure this is your money's worth at this point. We both laughed, and before I knew it, I was telling her everything. From Lila's confession to the night I met Sophia at the club. She listened quietly, her gaze never leaving mine. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. If you don't mind me saying, she began, your ex-wife is a real witch. Hearing someone take my side felt strangely good. She continued, I get her frustrations, but sleeping with your best friend? That's low. If you really love someone, you fight for it, no matter how hard it gets. You don't give up. That's the difference between love and everything else. Love is its own reason to fight. Her insight surprised me. I stared at her, amazed. She noticed and laughed. What? A dancer can't be deep? I laughed too. I guess you've learned more about life than most people. Her smile faded, her eyes darkening. More than normal people, she asked, her tone sharp. What's that supposed to mean? You think I'm damaged because I'm a dancer? I quickly shook my head. No, not at all. I just meant you've probably met a lot of people, heard a lot of their stories. You knew exactly what I was after when I walked into that club. She looked down at her menu, her jaw tightening. After a pause, her mood lightened, and a playful glint returned to her eyes. Would you let me get a slice of apple pie if I blow you? She teased, falling back into her seductive persona. It was clear she used humor and flirtation to keep people at arm's length, and yet I found her walls intriguing. Have you ever been in love? I asked softly. Her face stiffened, and for a moment, her sadness was unmistakable. She quickly changed the subject. Ethan, it's late. I need to get home and sleep. 5 a.m. is way past my bedtime. I glanced at my watch, shocked. Wow, it's 5 already? Time flies when you're with me, she quipped. I have that effect. Frustrating is more like it, I said with a grin. We spent all night talking about me, and I still don't know anything about you. Her guard dropped briefly. It had cost you a lot more than $300 to learn about me, she said softly, her voice almost vulnerable. What about $300 in breakfast? I joked. She laughed, a genuine laugh that felt different from her usual act. Ethan, we need to go. I need sleep. Some of us have to work for a living, she teased, sliding out of the booth. I do work, a lot. That's why my wife left me, I admitted with a wry smile. Well, when you do your job in 6-inch heels and lingerie, we'll compare notes, she shot back, making us both laugh. After paying the bill and leaving a tip, we headed back to the club. When we reached her car, she turned to me with her signature smirk. It's been a while since a man lasted all night with me. You've got some stamina, Ethan. I chuckled. Sophia, you helped me tonight. I don't let many people in, but I'm glad I let you. Thank you. Her playful mask fell away as she met my eyes. Anytime, Ethan. I hope things work out for you. You're a good guy. You deserve better. She leaned in and kissed me softly, not passionately, but warmly, like a friend. Then, without another word, she got into her car and drove off, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot. I headed back to the hotel, deciding to extend my stay for another night. As I lay in bed, a sense of relief washed over me, something I hadn't felt in years. The pain hadn't vanished, but it was starting to ease, becoming more bearable. It was a small step forward. About a week later, back at the house, Lila knocked on my office door. Her voice was tentative, almost nervous. After those nights at the hotel, I felt clearer, like I'd finally turned a corner. The fact that she seemed concerned about where I'd been amused me. Did she expect me to justify myself? Regardless, I reassured her that nothing had happened. Honestly, I didn't care what she thought anymore. I had started preparing to leave, renting a storage unit, and moving some of my belongings. I even began searching for a new place, a condo near work or a townhouse close to Lila and the girls. I was ready to move on. Or so I thought. That night, Lila walked into my office. "What is it, Lila?" I asked flatly, my tone making it clear I wasn't in the mood. Her face was puffy, tear-streaked. She'd been crying. "I just wanted to check on you," she said softly. "See how you're doing." "How sweet," I replied, dripping with sarcasm. The truth was, I was furious with her. That evening, we'd broken the news to the girls about our divorce. Telling Olivia and Emma, just 5 and 8 years old, that their parents were splitting up was soul-crushing. I had to be the one to shatter their world while Lila stood by, her unhappiness suddenly feeling insignificant compared to their heartbreak. "So yeah, I'm just peachy. Thanks for asking," I said bitterly. "Ethan." "What?" I snapped, tossing the pen I was holding onto the desk. It skidded off the edge, the sound sharper than I intended. "What do you want from me, Lila? You wanted freedom. I gave you that. You wanted half of everything, and I gave you that too. Alimony, child support, our kids. I gave you everything. So what more do you want?" "I just wanted to talk," she said quietly. I laughed bitterly. "Talk? Now you want to talk?" Too late. I had to break our daughters' hearts today. Tell them that Mommy and Daddy couldn't get their act together because Mommy slept with Daddy's best friend. So no, I don't have any sympathy left for you. If you need comfort, find someone who doesn't care that you destroyed our family. Maybe your boyfriend." Her expression tightened, shocked by my venom. "Do you have to be like this? Now, of all times, can't you just be human? I'm hurting too. Who cares if you're hurting?" I shot back. "You made this mess, and we're all suffering because of it. Go find Jacob, spread your legs, and let him comfort you. He seemed so helpful when you needed to move on from me. I'm sure he can help you forget the pain you've caused our daughters." She recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "We both put them through this, Ethan. We both played a part." "Oh yeah," I sneered. "I worked too hard, and you slept with my best friend. Totally equal." "You're such an asterisk hole," she spat before storming out. "At least I'm not a cheater." I yelled after her. She didn't respond, but I knew she'd heard me. Was I being childish? Probably. Did it feel good? Not really. It was just a way to vent my frustration. The pain of looking into my kids' eyes and breaking their hearts was a kind of agony I wouldn't wish on anyone. That night with Sophia had felt like progress, but tonight? Tonight was a massive leap backward. The next day at work, Chloe, my assistant, delivered the news of another meeting with the higher-ups. "Great," I groaned. "Didn't we just have one of these? What now?" "Calm down, Mr. Underwood," Chloe said, smirking. "You know how they are, pencil pushers. Don't let them see your frustration. What could they possibly want this time? I just gave them a progress report." Chloe hesitated, then leaned in, lowering her voice. "I don't think this is about the engine." I frowned. Chloe always seemed to know things before I did. "Then what's it about?" She smiled slyly. "Your old friend, Mr. Tanner. Jacob." Her tone carried a knowing edge, and I wondered how much she really knew about my personal life. Chloe had been the one to refer me to Nate, so she knew about the divorce. But had she pieced together the whole story? Why would they be meeting with me about him? I asked, lowering her voice even more. She said, "I heard he stole some company secrets when he left. They might be planning to sue him." The thought of Jacob being in trouble actually brightened my mood a little. I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice in the idea. "Still," I said, "why involve me?" She shrugged, but looked like she wanted to say more when someone interrupted us. "Excuse me, I'm looking for Ethan Underwood," a young man's voice said behind me. I turned. "I'm Ethan. How can I help you?" He introduced himself as Liam Carter, a representative from the security company contracted to upgrade our systems. He needed access to passwords, security logs, and other information and would be around for about a week. I sighed. "Look, Liam, I'm swamped. My assistant Chloe can help you with whatever you need. Chloe didn't seem to mind at all, flashing him a bright smile. As I walked away, I almost laughed to myself. Watching Chloe's infatuation with Liam reminded me of how things had started with Lila. Love often begins with infatuation, all excitement and butterflies, until it eventually unravels. When I reached the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense. This wasn't just another progress report. I could feel it. The tension in the boardroom was palpable. Along with the usual company heads, Nate and a few other lawyers were present, adding an air of gravity to the meeting. Nate took the lead, his voice calm and measured. "Good morning, Mr. Underwood. I'm Nathan Ross. We have a few questions about a former associate of yours, Mr. Jacob Tanner." The formal tone made me uneasy, though Nate already knew everything. He was doing his job, laying out the situation for the room and the stenographer busily typing away. "You worked with Mr. Tanner for years and were good friends, correct?" "Yes," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I remember him. We worked together and were friends, but I haven't spoken to him in months. What's this about?" Nate slid a paper across the table. It was a schematic. My stomach sank. I recognized it instantly. The propulsion system designed Jacob and I had stolen from an intern named Matthew years ago. The sight of it brought back a flood of memories, none of them good. "I think I've seen this before, but I'm not sure. Why are you asking me this?" I said, trying to sound calm, though the weight of past mistakes loomed over me. Nate adjusted his glasses, his tone even. "We believe Mr. Tanner developed this while employed here, using company resources. He recently patented it, and his company plans to launch it soon. If he created it here, we can claim it as ours." "Wait, Jacob developed this?" I asked, feigning surprise. Nate nodded. "We need to confirm its origins." I wrestled with my conscience, torn between keeping quiet and exposing Jacob. Then I remembered his betrayal, and the choice became easier. My conscience would survive. "I recognize this schematic, Mr. Ross, but Jacob didn't create it. He stole it from another intern." The room fell silent. Even Nate, who had heard much of the story before, seemed caught off guard. "Are you saying Mr. Tanner stole this design and passed it off as his own?" one of the company heads asked. "Yes, that's exactly what happened," I replied confidently. Nate's eyes narrowed slightly, gauging the implications. "Who was the intern?" "His name was Matthew. I don't remember his last name." "Did you witness Mr. Tanner stealing the schematic?" Nate pressed, his tone cautious. "Yes, I did," I admitted. I carefully distanced myself from the theft, framing my role as one of reluctant witness rather than active participant. "Jacob and I went out with Matthew for drinks, and later, Jacob stole the schematic from Matthew's laptop. I told him it was a bad idea." Nate summarized for the room. "So, Mr. Tanner, while inebriated, took the schematic from Matthew's laptop and later used it to his advantage. Is that correct?" "Yes," I confirmed, emphasizing Jacob's actions over my own involvement. The room buzzed with murmurs as the stenographer's fingers flew across the keyboard. The company heads seemed satisfied, their expressions a mix of intrigue and determination. "Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Underwood," one of them said, though their tone carried a hint of sarcasm. "It's not easy to testify against a former friend." Nate smirked subtly, and I met his gaze with an innocent expression. "If we can challenge the patent, we may be able to revoke it and claim the design as our own," another head said, already strategizing. "We need to find this Matthew immediately. He might have emailed the schematic to himself using his company email," I suggested. They nodded, discussing next steps. "Ethan, could this design help solve our current engine issues?" someone asked. "It's possible," I replied. "If we bring Matthew on board, I'm sure he could contribute even more." Satisfied smiles spread around the table. I had helped the company while delivering justice to Jacob. It was a win-win situation. As the meeting wrapped up, I couldn't help but feel a small sense of vindication. After all, who wouldn't enjoy seeing a backstabbing friend face consequences? About a week later, I was at an amusement park with my daughters when Jacob called. The girls were busy with snacks, so I stepped aside to answer. "What do you want, Jacob?" I asked, my tone curt. "You backstabber," he spat. "I know you ratted me out about the schematic." His anger only amused me. Jacob, you sound upset. Is there a problem? I replied, enjoying the chance to twist the knife. You're such an asterisk hole, he growled. Hello, Pot, I said dryly. Let me remind you, you tried to pass off stolen work as your own. Maybe if you'd focused more on your job and less on seducing my wife, you wouldn't be in this mess. He tried to defend himself, but I cut him off. You made your bed, Jacob. Lie in it. His tone shifted, becoming desperate. Ethan, please. This is my livelihood. Don't let my actions change who you are. You're better than this. His groveling was almost too good to be true. I decided to toy with him. Okay, I'll help you, but only if you stop seeing Lila. Silence stretched over the line. Finally, he relented. Fine, you win. I grinned. You really thought I'd help you? Have a nice life, Jacob. I ended the call with a smile, savoring the moment. Weeks passed. Work was steady, and I spent as much time as possible with my daughters. I was also in the midst of a bidding war for a townhouse near them. Living closer to the girls would keep me grounded. Moving to the condo near work might tempt me to overwork and repeat past mistakes. The townhouse symbolized my commitment to being present for my daughters. One evening, as I ate a meal Lila had prepared, she walked into my office. The sight of her felt oddly familiar yet distant, like a reminder of a life I was leaving behind. Despite our divorce, Lila still cooked for me occasionally, which I found surprising. One evening, she appeared at my office door, hesitant. Ethan, can we talk? She asked, struggling to find the right words. Eventually, she broke down, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry for what I did with Jacob, she confessed. I was so unhappy, and I just wanted to feel better. I made a mistake. She admitted that what started as a fling had turned into something more complicated when Jacob told her he loved her. I fell for him too, she said, her voice breaking. As she cried, I listened, but I realized her words didn't affect me anymore. Months ago, this confession would have shattered me. Now, it just felt like a sad conclusion to a story I was already done reading. Lila continued, admitting that falling for Jacob had magnified her unhappiness with me. Yet, she claimed she still loved me and hadn't planned to leave when she first confessed. I wanted to work on our marriage, she said, but everything got so twisted, and I just went along with the breakup. I shook my head, struggling to believe her. You say you didn't plan to leave, but I asked if you wanted to stay. You didn't fight for us. She sniffled, wiping her nose. I know. I would have fought for the marriage, for the kids, if you had. But I was okay with it ending, too. Her honesty hit harder than I expected, and I thought about our past conversations. Maybe it could have turned out differently, but we'd never know. You didn't say that back then, I replied quietly. Who knows if it would have changed anything, especially after you slept with my best friend. I know, she said softly. I'm sorry for everything. You didn't deserve that. I regret my choices. I should have come to you before anything happened. Suggested counseling or something. I owed it to you, to our marriage, to the kids. Her words felt sincere, and for the first time, I sensed that she truly understood the depth of her betrayal. I appreciate that, I said after a pause. It means a lot. She nodded, wiping her tears. When I first read the divorce papers, I realized this was all my doing. And telling the girls, it broke me. I knew I had to own up to my mistakes if I wanted to move on. I nodded. I've been there too, Lila, realizing how much I neglected you and the girls. Through her tears, she smiled faintly. You've been trying hard, and the girls love the extra attention. You're a great dad, Ethan, even when you were busy. Well, I said with a small laugh, you were a good mom, even though you cheated. We may have been lousy spouses, but our girls are proof we didn't completely fail. We shared a laugh, and then, unexpectedly, she pulled me into a hug. In that moment, the anger and hurt I'd been carrying dissolved. What replaced it was a bittersweet nostalgia for what we'd once had. Lila would always be the mother of my children, someone I cared about, but nothing more. At work the next day, Chloe greeted me with a bright smile. What's got you glowing? I asked, curious. Oh, I went out on a date with Liam, The security upgrade guy, she said, beaming. I was surprised but happy for her. She shared all the details, her excitement infectious. It was clear she was smitten. I'm happy for you, Chloe. You deserve it, I said sincerely. She hesitated before adding, I knew about your situation with Jacob but didn't bring it up because I figured you didn't want to talk about it. I appreciated her discretion and made a mental note to one day ask how she always seemed to know everything. The rest of the day flew by, and before I knew it, it was 8 p.m. Time to head home to my girls. As I walked to my car, I felt someone behind me. Suddenly, I was tackled to the ground. Jacob was on top of me, punching and shouting about how I'd ruined his life. His punches were wild and sloppy, but his rage was clear. I managed to push him off and stand up, facing him as he panted heavily, his face red with anger. Matthew is suing me, and your company is giving him a job, he shouted. They're taking the design from me, and it's all your fault. He lunged again, and soon we were brawling like two middle-aged kids with pent-up anger. Each punch felt like a release, fueled by betrayal, regret, and the need to make the other feel just a fraction of the pain we carried. The fight lasted maybe 5 minutes, but by the end, we were both gasping for air like extras in an overdone action movie. Security arrived, pulling us apart. One guard held me back while another practically pinned Jacob to the ground to calm him. Jacob cursed and thrashed, his fury only making the situation more absurd. I couldn't help but laugh. The more irrational he became, the funnier it was. You're banned from the premises, the guards told Jacob. Come back, and you'll be charged with trespassing. As they hauled him away, I felt a strange satisfaction. Not too long ago, I was the one nearly arrested for showing up at Jacob's house. Now the tables had turned. A month later, I won the bidding war for the townhouse near my daughter's. I paid $10,000 over the asking price, but it was worth it. The house wasn't as big as the one I'd shared with Lila, but it was perfect for me. A cozy backyard, a park down the street, and a bike trail leading to the beach. It symbolized a fresh start and my commitment to staying close to my girls. One evening, as I settled into my new routine, Lila walked into my office. It was moments like these that reminded me how much life had changed and how far I'd come. Moving day was bittersweet. I was excited for a fresh start but nervous about what lay ahead. Luckily, Nate came to help, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my struggles. He may have played a bigger role in his own marriage's downfall, but his presence made him relatable, proof that even the worst mistakes could be overcome. As we loaded the last box, Lila teared up. So, this is it, she said softly. Yep, I'm finally out of your hair, I replied with a weak smile. A tear rolled down her cheek. Yay, she joked half-heartedly. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the Lila I married years ago. Life had changed us, though. The people we once were no longer existed. Now, we were older, wiser versions of ourselves, ready to part ways. You know, Lila, I said hesitantly, I never apologized for neglecting you all those years. You deserved better. Tears flowed freely as she hugged me, crying into my shoulder. Well, I added, trying to lighten the mood, at least you won't have to worry about the toilet seat anymore. She laughed weakly, and we let go. As I climbed into the moving truck, she hesitated. Ethan, you can't cook worth a damn. If you're ever hungry, feel free to come over for dinner. It'd be good for the girls. I paused before replying, I don't think that's a good idea, especially if Jacob's around. She shook her head. Oh, you don't have to worry about Jacob. We're not seeing each other anymore. That caught me off guard. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? Jacob and I were doomed from the start, she admitted. His anger toward you, and everything else, just made it worse. I can't have that kind of negativity around the girls. I thought about telling her how Jacob had chosen his job over her after I gave him an ultimatum, but she didn't need that right now. Instead, I hugged her one last time. Take care of yourself, Lila. She nodded, stepping back as I started the truck. As I drove away, she waved goodbye, and I headed toward my new home. Later that evening, Nate and I decided to grab a beer. Want to hit Mario's? He asked, a mischievous grin on his face. The mention of Mario's made me think of Sophia. I hadn't seen her since that night at IHOP, but she crossed my mind often. Nah, let's hit a sports bar, I replied, avoiding the idea of seeing her in her starlet persona again. The real connection I'd made with Sophia hadn't been at the club. It had been over pancakes and late-night conversations. The real Sophia was a complex, caring person hiding behind a tough exterior, a heart that had been hurt too many times but still cared deeply. Later that night, I found myself standing in the parking lot outside Mario's. The neon lights cast a glow on the empty street. Before I could overthink it, I heard a familiar voice. James, if that's you by my car, you better walk away. If I have to call Bruno, it won't end well. I raised my hands quickly. Sophia, it's me. I'm sorry for scaring you. She stepped closer, squinting. Ethan? What are you doing lurking around my car? I shifted nervously. I didn't know how else to see you. She crossed her arms. Why didn't you just come inside? I didn't want to see Starlet. I wanted to see you. Her expression hardened, but I thought I saw a flicker of something softer. Ethan, no, she said, her voice firm. Sophia, just listen, I pleaded. I feel something for you. I don't know what it is, but it's something. You were there for me when I needed it most. Ethan, she began, shaking her head. I know what you're going to say. You don't do the girlfriend thing. You're not built for it. But those are just excuses, and you know it. She brushed past me, opening her car door. So, you're just going to walk away? I asked, my voice rising. She turned sharply, glaring at me. Yes, because I know how this ends. What do you see for us, Ethan? Romantic dates? Love in the moonlight? Then what? I go to work, give lap dances, get groped, and then crawl into bed with you like it's normal? Are you going to introduce me to your parents? Your kids? Tell them how we met? I've been down this road before, and it doesn't end well for me. She got into her car, but before she could back out, I stepped in front of it. Get out of the way, Ethan, she shouted. I stood firm until she angrily climbed out. Sophia, I don't have all the answers, but I feel something for you, and I think you feel it too. We don't have to date. We can just be friends. I just want to get to know you. She crossed her arms, looking away. Her silence stretched, but I waited, knowing I'd said enough. Finally, she sighed. God, you're annoying. So, is that a yes? I asked cautiously. She didn't reply but handed me her phone. Put your number in before I change my mind. I grinned, quickly entering my number. Really? I asked, handing it back. Yes, hurry up, she muttered, her irritation fading into something softer. You'll call, right? I asked. Stop being such a little girl. I'll call, she replied, rolling her eyes. Now move before I run you over. As she backed out of the parking space, she paused. For a brief moment, she gave me a look, not quite a smile, but something gentler. It wasn't Starlet. It wasn't her tough exterior. It was Sophia. Then she looked away and drove off into the night.